What do printing presses, jewelry boxes, old shoes, and the Academy of Music have in common? Well, naturally, another episode of the Gilded Age. Hey everyone, this is D, Movie Man, fellow cinephile, popcorn addict, and emerging film critic, coming to you with reliable recaps, reviews, and reactions. And today, I'm coming to you all with another episode of The Gilded Age, Season 1, Episode 4, A Long Ladder. This episode was directed by Salli Richardson-Whitfield and written by Julian Fellows. So we open up this episode with a very stark parallel. We are seeing the fall of the Morris family with Mr. Morris's burial, and we are also seeing the rise of the Russell family with the plans for his new rail station underway. Later, we see Bertha telling George of Mr. Morris's demise. In her mind, she feels that George was strong and Mr. Morris was weak, so he's not to blame. But we can also see that George still doesn't feel great about the circumstances. We also hear that Mrs. Grant, which is Gladys's governess, is about to be sacked, because apparently she's lost all control of Gladys. After rightfully rejecting that ridiculous offer at the Christian Advocate, we learn that Peggy has been asked by T. Thomas Fortune, the editor of the New York Globe, to discuss writing for them. She and Marian discuss that along with Tom's proposal. It still seems very rushed to Marian, and Peggy decides to ask her what she would say if her aunts didn't exist. But of course, Marian is still unsure. Then Marian sees a shop she's interested in checking out, and clearly Peggy is leery of doing that, but Marian is just very excited to see the items that are inside. And when I saw Peggy's face before she stepped inside, I was like, okay. We already know what's going down. Naturally, the workers are not pleased to see someone of Peggy's hue inside the store. But at the same time, Marian runs into Mrs. Chamberlain, who shows her a jewelry box she recently purchased. And because Mrs. Chamberlain notices how the store manager is looking at Peggy, she also asks Peggy if she would like to see the jewelry box as well. So Marian officially introduces Peggy to Mrs. Chamberlain, and shortly after, Mrs. Chamberlain decides to leave, lest anyone think that they planned this little shopping excursion. Next, we see George speaking to Mr. Fane, and he expresses his remorse for what has happened to Mr. Morris. Mr. Fane can't really say much, except that they behaved badly, and he understands why he had to punish them. Just so happens Mr. Morris wasn't equal to the task. And George himself says that this is no game for weaklings. You guys remember what I said on my last recap, right? As it stands, it appears that the aldermen will be passing the bill after all, and since George is no longer angry, things may actually progress smoothly now. Next, we see Bannister out walking Pumpkin, Ada's Cocker Spaniel, but gets distracted by a horse bucking its reins, and then sees that Pumpkin has slipped out of his collar and disappeared. Naturally, Ada is distraught. She's worried that someone might find him and sell him for $50, and Agnes says, well, only if they don't know the breed. She also says, you survived a whole civil war, yet you fall to pieces because a lapdog is missing? Okay, next we see the staff discussing Pumpkin's disappearance, and we also see Jack attempting to ask Bridget out again, but Bridget is visibly frustrated. Next, we find out the specifics of Mrs. Grant's firing, which is because she had the audacity to take Gladys out to meet a young man at a hotel in broad daylight. And Bertha knows all this because she has discovered one of Gladys's letters. Gladys is frustrated, and she tells her mother that she is a woman now, not a child. And even Mrs. Grant says that she's an adult now, and she just can't be cooped up in this house forever. But of course, Bertha is not having it. Next, we see Mr. and Mrs. Fane having a conversation about recouping the money that they've lost. Now, I noticed that Mr. Fane said the money that I lost, and Mrs. Fane had to correct him and say the money we lost. Now, she also had to correct him that same way the last episode, so I found that to be really interesting. In addition to what Mr. Fane says about not wanting to rely on the charity of Mrs. Fane's father. Mr. Fane recognizes that George is trying to make amends by letting him recover financially. But as far as Mrs. Fane is concerned, he's only doing that because eventually he expects something in return. And that something would be for Mrs. Fane to bring Bertha into society, because George is over her being snubbed and excluded. We see Gladys saying goodbye to Mrs. Grant when Pumpkin unexpectedly runs up to the house. As Mrs. Bruce picks up the dog, she notices Watson leaving the house. Bertha comes outside, and because she recognizes the dog, she tells Mrs. Bruce to give the dog a bath and something to eat, and she plans on drafting a note for her footman to deliver. Next, we see Peggy at the New York Globe. She ends up assisting a young man with the printing press, which I thought was so cool because I've actually seen one in person before. And she realizes that this man is in fact Mr. Fortune. And as soon as I saw him, I immediately recognized the actor. His name is Sullivan Jones, and he has been busy. Not only is he playing Mr. Fortune in this series, but I just saw him as Jameson in the Prime Video series Harlem, Barry in the film 18 and a Half, Byron in False Positive, and he also played Ed Austin in the Netflix miniseries Halston. And all of that was in 2021. So it is safe to say that he is on a really good trajectory right now. Mr. Fortune also introduces Peggy to George Parker. And Mr. Parker is worried about their ability to increase subscriptions if they continue to print things that are provoking and controversial. Mr. Fortune feels like they'll get subscriptions eventually, but not by kowtowing to the Republican Party. He also asks if Peggy has ever considered writing anything political. She has, but it's pretty difficult to have a perspective on either side when she's not even able to vote. Touché. Not only does Mr. Fortune plan on publishing the stories she's submitted, he also would like her to write about the subject that she's just mentioned. Political affiliation without registration. In 200 words. I was like, come on, Peggy. I've been rooting for Peggy anyway, and it's really awesome to see that she has completely recovered after the foolishness of that last situation. We jump back over to the Van Ryn household, and Agnes and Ada realize that Pumpkin has been found. But considering that a note was sent over and not Pumpkin directly, Agnes believes that they simply kidnapped the dog so that Mrs. Russell could deliver it in person. She's trying to force them to receive her. So she decides to send Bannister to retrieve the dog. Elsewhere, we see Watson watching and possibly stalking a young woman named Mrs. McNeil. I was just like, I hope this isn't what I think it is. There's probably more to it, but I was just like, Watson, let's not be creepy here. So once Bannister makes it to the Russells, things get interesting because he and Church have a very unique rapport together. Now, Bannister is English and Church is American. So it's clear that the manner in which they run things from household to household is significantly different. But based on Bannister's tone, it's clear that one way is significantly inferior to the other. Later, we see Mrs. Chamberlain's jewelry box arrive for Marian, but because she very well can't give up the sender, she decides to just return it. And when Marian finally admits to Ada that the sender is Mrs. Chamberlain, she is like, whoa, whoa, whoa. She is significantly worse than Mrs. Russell. To be near her, to come in contact with her, is to be contaminated. So she needs a hazmat suit to hang out with Mrs. Chamberlain. They also discuss Marian's prospects for marriage, and the problem is that Marian doesn't know what's suitable for her versus what's suitable for Agnes. She asks Ada if she ever considered marriage, and yes, at one point she did, but because of her father's high standards, it didn't work out. Marian wonders if Ada would have been happier had she married him. And to Ada, it's like, that's a really cruel question. Yeah, and I kind of thought that too. I was like, I know you probably didn't have ill intentions, but that's kind of an insult. Ada says, you may think me to be a weaker person than Agnes, and maybe I am. But even I know that marrying beneath oneself is no guarantee of happiness. And I was like, well, there it is. And I see people in marriages and relationships all the time that aren't fulfilled and aren't happy, but they stay in them because they feel like that's what's expected of them. Like that's the structure of their life. They're supposed to be married and they're supposed to do all these things. And for a lot of people, they feel like the alternative to that is devastating. Now, that's not me saying that marriage can't be an awesome thing, a blessed thing, a beautiful thing. My great-grandparents were married for over 60 years. My aunt and my uncle have been married for over 35 years. So, like, it's definitely some great examples of marriage, and it can definitely be beneficial. But this whole idea that if you are not married, then it's just like, oh my gosh, like a fate worse than death. And it's just like, that is just not a mindset to entertain. Marian returns the jewelry box to Mrs. Chamberlain, and they have a brief discussion while they look at her art collection. Marian asks if the art was inherited, and she says, yeah, no, we're the new people. They also discuss Mr. Chamberlain, and when Marian asks how they met, all of a sudden Mrs. Chamberlain gets real rigid, and she's like, well, why did you ask that? And so Marian is like, okay, I will ask another question. So, how did you guys build this collection? Mrs. Chamberlain mentions that her husband was a widower when he met her, and that he and his first wife didn't understand the power that money had now put into their hands. She showed him, taught him how to live, and they ended up having a wonderful life together. She also mentions that her son grew tired of New York and currently resides in Chicago. Now make sure you don't forget any of that. Next, we see Mrs. Fane meeting with Bertha, and really quickly, I noticed that knob in the wall that Bertha pulled, and once she sat down, then one of the servants showed up and she asked for coffee. And I thought that was such a cool detail. And it's even more interesting looking at that because I was just at Studio Movie Grill, and if you've been to one of those, then on your seat, they have a little button you press, and then the waiters come and they take your order. So it's so interesting seeing something similar, seeing that parallel in 1882, and then all the way in 2022. But getting on to the reason for Mrs. Fane's visit, she is going to put her best foot forward and invite Bertha to meet with Mr. McAllister. Mrs. Fane refers to him as Mrs. Astor's amanuensis in helping her shape society. Now, this is all very timely and very ironic because earlier Ada had mentioned to Marian that it would be nice for her to find someone that's good to her, but hopefully someone who also falls on the McAllister 400. And what is the significance of that number, you ask? That term is derived from a statement that Mr. McAllister once made, saying that there were only 400 people in fashionable New York society. So, if you are deemed one of the 400, it essentially means that you are in the winner's circle. And some of the old money families included in the 400 were the Van Cortlands, the Schuylers, the Van Rensselaers, the Schermerhorns, and the Rhinelanders. But there were also new money families like the Vanderbilts that also were a part of the 400. So for Mrs. Fane to provide Bertha with this kind of opportunity carries a whole lot of weight. She also invites Bertha to a concert at the Academy of Music, which is being held to aid the Red Cross. And it just so happens that Bertha's assistance with the Red Cross will benefit George as well. Having that connection will assist with any potential railroad accidents, and it'll also show that they have genuine concern for their passengers. Next, we see Oscar whining about being dropped by the Russells. And once Ada finds out that he had heard that the Russells were finished, she was like, in other words, you dropped them. I'm actually on their side. I must say, Oscar gets lamer and lamer as the episodes go by. Loser! Then Marian arrives, and after she tells the two of them her experience with Mrs. Chamberlain, Oscar decides to drop a little bomb. Apparently, Mr. Chamberlain was married to his first wife when the current Mrs. Chamberlain came along. They carried on an affair, which produced a child, and the affair continued until his wife finally died. Then, he brought her to New York. Now, that is significantly different than what Mrs. Chamberlain told her. No one knows whether that's true or not, but since everyone believes it to be true, it's basically the same thing. We then get a really sad development with Bridget. Mrs. Bauer checks on Bridget and she sees that she's crying. Bridget tells her that she had never known happiness until she came to this house. And what we are left to piece together is that Bridget was abused by someone, and her mother just sat there and let it happen. And I feel like abusers and people who enable abusers, it's just two sides of the same disgusting coin. But I can understand Bridget's perspective, and it makes it significantly more evil because you have a child that you have carried around in your womb, and you have birthed this child, and this child is a part of you, that is your daughter. And nowhere in your mind do you think, let me protect my child. Let me comfort my child. Let me save my child from this horrible, traumatizing situation. Like, that just disturbs me in a much deeper way. I'm glad, if nothing else, that Mrs. Bauer was there for her. I'll just leave it there, but know that that is something, a subject that really, really gets under my skin. And then next, we get a scene that is so cringeworthy and so embarrassing. I was just like, why? As we all saw coming, Turner has become so bold as to literally place herself in George's bed in order to seduce him. And of course, George is completely thrown off. And she's talking about making him a sanctuary and a temple for his greatness. I said, okay, I'm sorry, what books have you been reading? Like, where did you get that from? I just was like, oh no, this is such a bad look. And George quickly shuts it down and he lets her know, I have everything I need. I have my home, I have my wife, I have my family, I have my life, and none of that includes you.
Boom! Yeah.
George does not fire her. He tells her to simply keep her mouth closed because his wife trusts her and holds her in very high regard. That honestly made zero sense to me. George has given this woman nothing. He's been incredibly polite given the circumstances, but then you decide, hey, let me jump into your bed, legs to the moon. Turner. But let me also say that not firing Turner, I think that is going to come back and bite George in the buttocks. Then we jump over to Brooklyn with the Scott family. I love seeing that initial shot of all the family portraits. I am proud to say that I actually have pictures of my own family at this time, and it is the most astonishing thing to look back on and have that reference. I literally have a picture of my grandfather with his family as a little boy. And man, it just, you feel so connected. Like, you feel this sense of lineage and this sense of legacy, and that's such an impactful thing to be able to see. So I definitely appreciated seeing that in this scene. And overall, I love this whole moment because we are seeing this affluent black family in the 19th century, which did exist. I have said plenty of times that when it comes to blackness, we have been present throughout history, but only aspects of that history get showcased. The rest of it, like, doesn't get talked about. Just look up John Amilcar and Marie Antoinette. Look up John Blank and Henry VIII. It's all there. You just have to be willing to look for it. So Julian Fellows actually talked about a book that he read that helped inform his experience about this community during this time. And the name of that book is Black Gotham, a family history of African Americans in 19th century New York City by Carla Peterson. And he says that he read that and he was blown away because he had no idea that that even existed. And I think there are a lot of people, white, black, otherwise, who still don't realize that that was a very significant and very true part of history. And what also has added to this very intentional black lens and structure of this story, we have Erica Armstrong Dunbar. She is a professor of history at Rutgers University, and her work focuses on black American women of the 18th and 19th centuries. She was enlisted as a historical consultant and a co-executive producer. We also have television writer and author Sonia Warfield. She is assisting with the story editing and co-writing with Julian Fellows, and she is also a co-executive producer. And then, as you might recall, Salli Richardson-Whitfield is also our director and an executive producer of the series. So seeing this massive force of black women and black talent in front of the camera and behind the camera, just as a part of production in the process, helping craft this story and fleshing it out and giving dimension and exposing this side of history. There really are no words, but I love to see it. But then we see the first-hand perspective of somebody showing up to Peggy's family home, and it is none other than Marian. And when I tell you, I was hollering by all the folks walking by like, are you lost? And Marian is arriving at a really inopportune time because Peggy and her father are having a little tete-a-tete about her writing aspirations. He doesn't believe in it. He doesn't get it. He's like, look, I own a pharmacy. You should just come and work for me, and then I can pass it down to you. Marian rings the bell. She presents her card to Ellen the maid. And as soon as I saw Marian kind of like peeking around the house, I knew it was all downhill from there. Peggy makes the introductions, but Peggy's father is very confused as to why Marian has shown up uninvited. Marian is there to deliver something for Peggy that she thought would be useful, but she now realizes isn't. They ask to see what it is, and it turns out to be some old shoes. All of them, including Ellen, are just like, Peggy just decides to head out, and she is heated. Not only have you shown up to my parents' house uninvited, you show up with these cast-off shoes with the assumption that we're basically poor, even though I paid for your train fare. Marian doesn't understand what was wrong with her showing up at her parents' house because her aunt lets Peggy live at their house, and she was like, let me. I work there. And I feel like even if she didn't work there, how are you in a position to show up anywhere uninvited knowing that that's not how things are done on your side of town? Well, we're just going to pop over to Brooklyn and like, hey, everybody. Yeah, no. And Peggy keeps going. She's like, you know nothing about me, about my life, about my situation. I live in a completely different country from the one you know. I'm good on the apologies. Just stop pretending you're actually my friend. And listen, ultimately, whether Marian has good intentions or not, she was operating from a place of bias. Very unconscious bias. We all have that, it happens. Whether it's race, religion, gender, like the list goes on. We all have unconscious things that spring up from time to time, and we're not aware of it, but still, it can cause us to say or do things that are messed up. And so, Marian played herself, to make a long story short. And let's not forget that when they were in the store earlier, she was completely oblivious to how the workers and the store manager were treating Peggy. It was just like right over her head. And if nothing else, this is a very teachable moment for Marian. Next, we see Bertha heading out to the Academy of Music with this massive, sweeping, deep red gown, and actually realize it's the same one from the opening credits. And then on top of that, she adds this really elaborate beaded cape. So at the Academy of Music, we hear the sounds of In the Spring by John Knowles Paine. Marian looks over and sees that Tom, of all people, is in the box next to her and in the company of Mrs. Henry Skirmahorn. Tom sits down with Marian and he tells her that he knows that her aunts don't approve of him, so he is hoping to improve himself until they do. And my first thought was how he could have possibly made it in with the Skirmahorns of all people. Apparently, 2 years earlier, Tom took a course in property law at the University of Pennsylvania. Jerry Skirmahorn was on the same one, but then years later, he ended up running into him on the ice at Central Park. And they both are hoping that everything will eventually work itself out. And Marian even tells him, like, if you don't succeed, then all of this will be lost to you. He says it wouldn't matter as long as he has her. Bertha re-enters the box and she asks Marian about the young man she was just speaking to. And Marian tells her it's just an old friend from Pennsylvania. Bertha is intrigued by that because he seems to be quite at home in New York. Marian finds it astonishing. When he first got here, he knew no one. And now he's here in a box at the academy. I said it once, I will say it again. Marian?
You in danger, girl.
And that closes out episode 4, A Long Ladder. Things really ramped up in this episode. I am really enjoying Peggy's story the most just because of all the layers that are there. I still want to know what's going on with her father and what he did for them and their relationship to be so fractured, but I'm sure we're going to find that out very soon. Things are happening and everything is just really chugging along, and I'm happy to see it because, like I said, with the first episode, everything felt a little too stiff, a little too contrived, and now I feel like everything is coming to life. It's starting to feel real, like I'm seeing the connections, everything is coming together just right. So I am so excited. Cannot wait to see what happens next. And as always, please leave a comment below and let me know what you thought of this episode. Tell me what you thought about Peggy. How do you feel about her backstory and her whole storyline being fleshed out? How do you feel about her conversation with Marian? How do you feel about how Marian handled that whole situation with Peggy and her family? How did you feel about the black elite who actually existed? How do you feel about Bertha's progress? How do you feel about Turner's foolishness? Please, feel free to drop down in the comments and let me know what you think. So, once again, it's D, Movie Man, signing off, and I'll see you with the movies.